Welcome back. Ahead of Thursday's first presidential debate, former President Trump once again used dehumanizing language when talking about migrants this weekend. He told a gathering of conservative Christians in Washington, D.C., that he suggested starting a league where migrants would fight one another to UFC President Dana White.
I said, Dana, I have an idea. Why don't you set up a migrant league of fighters and have your regular league of fighters, and then you have the champion of your league. These are the greatest fighters in the world. Fight the champion of the migrants. I think the migrant guy might win. That's how tough they are. He didn't like that idea too much, but actually it's not the worst idea I've ever had. No, it's these are tough people. These people are tough and they're nasty, mean. It's incredible that they come totally unchecked.
Now, the Biden campaign quickly reacting, saying, quote, fitting that convicted felon Donald Trump spent his time at a religious conference threatening to round up Latinos, bragging about ripping away Americans' freedoms and promising to be even more extreme if he regains power. Joining us now, former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo of Florida. He's also an NBC News political analyst, and our Vaughn Hilliard, who covers the Trump campaign. Vaughn, this is really just the latest in a string of dehumanizing comments related to migrants that we are hearing from the former president, and people were laughing.
I don't know to what extent to even begin to legitimize or provide any sort of credence to the suggestion made by the former president. And I say that because we, of course, know that most of the migrants that are coming to the United States are men, women, and children that are seeking a better life in leaving really dire circumstances. And of course, Donald Trump is not providing any details as to what this would even look like. I mean, it sounds more like a version of Gladiator in America in the year of 2024. But when we're talking about migrants, Donald Trump has referred to them as vermin, dangerous, sick, criminals. And he said that migrants have poisoned the blood of this country. He has also promised the largest deportation program in American history. Those are the words of the former president of the United States. It's going to be up to voters to determine whether it's that sort of rhetoric that they want to install back into the White House in 2025.
Congressman, give us your reaction to these latest comments.
Well, Anna, look, obviously, from a moral standpoint, this is condemnable and regrettable, right? And this is exactly the type of rhetoric that's tearing this country apart. For some political analysis, I think this is the type of rhetoric, the types of statements that really scare off the swing voters in swing states that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to need if they're going to win the election. I mean, this is the reason why, one of the main reasons why President Biden won in 2020, because some Americans thought that Donald Trump was just too risky, too chaotic, too aggressive in the way he expresses himself. And here he is with a lead in a lot of swing states, but making those same kinds of comments, which obviously are objectionable, but politically, they're major mistakes that could cost him the votes of the very voters he needs to get back to office.
I mean, those comments are shocking on one hand, but he's gaining support with some Latino voters in the polls, at least it appears. How do you square that?
Well, Anna, there are many explanations for that. I mean, we are weighing a number of culture war questions in this country. I think that has benefited Republicans. I also think that Democrats and the victimhood narrative that they have applied to a lot of Hispanic communities has been rejected by a lot of those communities. And look, a lot of people assume that just because someone's Hispanic, they're okay with people crossing the border illegally. A lot of Hispanics have rejected the Biden immigration policies. However, when Trump makes comments like this, it really does give a lot of Hispanic voters pause, and it does scare them away. So again, Donald Trump is his own worst enemy. Aside from making comments that are morally objectionable, they could also cost him politically with the communities that he's gained a lot of ground with in recent years.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.